What's up, guys? Good afternoon. And I usually don't do videos like this, and I know there's a bunch of stuff happening with the present of the Seattle Seahawks right now, but this is going to have to be a little bit different, I think, because this is a little too special to ignore. This doesn't happen that often, and given the fact that it's happened, I think we got to at least take one video about this one. Today is the 10-year anniversary of the Seattle Seahawks winning, as of this date, their only Super Bowl championship. So that's definitely something to think about. That's definitely something to mull on for at least a little bit. That's definitely something that merits some degree of discussion. So, the greatest day in Seahawks franchise history. I don't know what other day could be better, honestly. Like, there have been other great moments. The first time we won the conference, beating the Niners 2 weeks before this game, the comeback against Green Bay in the NFC title game. I don't. Obviously, they're great, but I don't know how you could seriously argue that those moments beat actually winning a Super Bowl, because those moments all are supposed to be building up towards this, and this is the only time we got to this. So it is 10 years to the day when the Seattle Seahawks played the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl and mopped the floor with them. So I want to talk a little bit about this game. I want to talk a little bit about my memory of it. I want to talk about what I remember, and just this team in general, because this was the culmination of a team that had been put together over the previous couple years. Obviously, there would be some players on this team that wouldn't truly break out until after this game was played. Guys like Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin became much more prolific players after this game, but the team in general was built for this game above all others. And you had guys like Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas in their prime. You had guys in their athletic prime, like Bobby Wagner. At the very least, he was in his athletic prime. You had Marshawn Lynch basically in his prime. So there was so much stuff that went into this team, and it all came together and clicked perfectly. And this is a very rare circumstance, I think, in any sport, where your team plays the best possible game that they can play in the biggest, most important game. Like, there are teams that will win when they're supposed to. There are teams that will capitalize on their best team by winning the title, but it's not often they show up like this and dominate like this for 3 hours against a team they're supposed to lose to. And that's kind of what I remember from the lead up to this game. I actually remember I had just started a job at Facebook. I actually worked at Facebook for about 5 months in Seattle, and I was living in Bellevue at the time, and I had to make a commute via bus to work every day, which tremendous pain in the butt. I don't recommend it to anybody. Having to rely on the bus, especially when you're going over a drawbridge every morning and every evening while you're at it, is tremendously inconvenient. I don't wish that on just about anybody. But I remember people on the bus, people talking about it, people who I didn't even know. I would just overhear conversations. People at work. I had just started, so I didn't really know anybody all that well. And there were some people who worked in the office who were football fans, and some people weren't. There was, I remember there was a security guard who was very convinced that we were just going to lose. But I also remember one of the things that kind of stayed with me as we went into this game was when I was on the bus on Friday night before this game. When we got to the stop, when we got to our stop where I parked my car on the way home, I remember the bus driver getting on the little PA thing and talking and saying, this is our stop, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes, good luck to the Seahawks this weekend. I truly believe that after this game, we're going to be Super Bowl champions. And that kind of confidence at the time seemed to be purely born of fandom, right? Like, you think the Seahawks are going to win because you're a Seahawks fan. That's the only reason why. This is the greatest offense of all time. You have a second year quarterback who basically is a game manager. Like, this is a quarterback-driven league. Even back then, it was a quarterback-driven league. How are you going to beat Peyton Manning coming off his best season ever, 55 touchdowns, basically ran a train on the postseason? How are you going to handle that with a second-year quarterback who basically is just they didn't think much more of him at that time than somebody like a Brad Johnson. I'm not going to say Trent Dilfer, that's a different level. But I do remember that bus driver. I have no idea who he was, but I do remember getting off the bus that night, hearing that, and thinking, at least somebody said it, right? Because not a lot of people were picking the Seahawks going into this game. And I'm not here to revisit all that, but that is something that stands out to me thinking about this game before we got to it. So I drove down to where my parents lived at the time, and that night, and watched the game with them. And I remember we had a couple family friends over. There was one family that we had developed a relationship with where, as in, my mom was friends with their mom, and my dad was friends with their dad, and their kids were friends with me and my brother. So they all would they all came by for the game. We did some fancy stuff for the game. We got a cake. We got a special cake. It looked like a football field. Um, and I mean, you couldn't have a better 3 hours of football. Everything goes right, even the stuff you don't control, like the first snap of the game where the ball goes over Peyton's head for the safety. Because I remember Manny Ramirez, the center for the Broncos at that time. Manny Ramirez just got the yips, something that he's probably handled 1,000 times that year alone, maybe thousands of times if you include practice. And he just freaks out when Peyton comes up to the line to make his checks and chucks the ball over his head. We didn't have control over that. That wasn't something our team did, but that was the kind of stuff that was happening. I remember we kicked a couple of field goals. Percy Harvin got off to a really good start, and it still didn't really feel like it meant anything yet. Like, we were up 8-0, and then we got the Cam Chancellor interception, and there was a 3rd-and-goal play where Wilson throws the ball to Golden Tate, goes way over Tate's head. He has no real chance. Well, I don't want to say no chance, but he is unlikely to catch it. And Tony Carter, a Broncos cornerback, without looking at the ball, just shoves Golden Tate out the back of the end zone while the ball is in the air. It is one of the most brain dead penalties that you'll ever see. Just no reason for it. Very little chance Tate was going to catch the ball. And there's no attempt on Tony Carter's part to even pretend like he's looking at the ball. And sure enough, pass interference. 2 plays later, Marshawn gets in the end zone for his touchdown. And it starts to feel like things are actually happening. The pick six was a big moment, but for me, even going into halftime, the Bruno Mars halftime, it kind of felt like it still felt like Denver was fine. Even the pick six, even the interception, even the failed 4th down attempt that Denver did right before the end of the second quarter. I remember that. It just kind of felt like, they're going to wake up. They got to wake up. Their offense is way too good. They're way too talented. They have way too many great players. It's 22-0. That doesn't really mean that much. They're going to figure this out. And that halftime kick return, that was like a moment where you're just like, man, everything's just coming up perfect for us in this one game. That was the best. This is the best game we played all year by a pretty wide margin. And we played some really good games. And it just so happens to be in this moment. And it's the really one shining moment of Percy Harvin's Seattle career, which, hey, he'll always have a special place in Seattle no matter how badly things ended with him. Just the same. I know it's not the same thing, but just the same way things ended poorly with Russell Wilson and Richard Sherman. And to a certain extent, you could say it ended poorly with Marshawn Lynch. Maybe you could say it ended poorly with a couple other guys as well, Earl Thomas. But we'll always have this game. And Percy Harvin just went off. He for one game, everything just worked. And I remember at that time thinking to myself, this team just has to be a dynasty now. We didn't even have Percy Harvin all year. We won 13 games, made the Super Bowl. Now look at what he's doing now that we have him. Like, how is this not going to be a dynasty? And things didn't quite go that way. But watching this game, it was like, we haven't even seen the best version of the Seahawks until today. And the best version of the Seahawks just clobbered the greatest offense of all time. Of course, Curse's touchdown was awesome, especially because Curse is he's to a certain extent he didn't grow up super close to where I grew up, but he did go to Lakes, which is a elementary school, or excuse me, high school that is not terribly far from where I grew up. So to people in my area, Jermaine Curse is kind of a local guy. So it was really cool to see him make plays in the Super Bowl, get in the end zone. Um, Being able to keep the heat up on the Denver offense and basically shutting them out for the end of the game when it was garbage time was just, it was something else, right? You would think that Peyton Manning and Demaryius Thomas and Wes Welker and those boys would be able to put up like 3 garbage time touchdowns at least, but they got one. They had to work their asses off to get the one. Ton of pressure on Peyton all day by the pass rush, hitting hard in the secondary, forcing the fumble on Thomas, who, by the way, Demaryius Thomas was probably the one Bronco who played his butt off. I don't mean to say anything bad about him because the busted shoulder probably led to him fumbling anyway. Um, it's just one of those beautiful moments, and you never really know how your team is going to win their first championship. And the fact that our championship came in a circumstance where the whole team basically played as good as they could for 60 minutes is special. And this will never not be special. So, on a day like today, remember this one, celebrate it. Remember the garbage time where Tavares Jackson actually got in the game, threw a pass in the Super Bowl, got a Super Bowl ring out of it. Remember the fact that so many of our beloved players got in the end zone in this game. Remember defense and special teams touchdowns. A 7th-round pick won Super Bowl MVP. It was a special day, and today's a special day too because of it. See you guys later. Go Hawks.